Ready or Not from Void Interactive is a tactical first-person shooter set in the fictional city of Los Sueños in the modern-day United States. It follows the Los Sueños Police Department SWAT team D Platoon through various scenarios with the self-proclaimed goal of bringing order to chaos. This analysis will examine the game through the lenses of culture and violence within games. This presentation does include violent images and video. The first topic is violence, specifically whether censorship of extreme acts like terrorism in games prevents dialogue with players about violent topics. Ready or Not renders extreme violence in close detail, including gunfire, blood, and other gore. In a typical game in the present time, such things are rarely seen as uniquely disturbing by players. However, the context of such violence within the game has been a source of controversy in the past, where during development the scenario of a school shooting was planned. It was later self-censored in development after internal fears of being unable to handle the content with the level of weight and respect that it warrants. The level was later reintroduced, but in the form of a shooting and bombing of a college campus rather than a grade school. This demonstrates a dilemma many game developers, studios, and publishers face. How can extremely confronting acts be done justice without offending players' sensibilities? Research from Fisher et al. Shows that 47 to 54% of adults agree that violent acts and related content should be censored in media, yet this may raise questions of whether such censorship should impact open social dialogue regarding terrorism and other extreme acts. In a statement, the Void Interactive team said, "We hope we can play some small part in honouring those who have been impacted by these real-world tragedies with a portrayal that does not trivialise these arguments." This level's design change is representative of a decision that is unlikely to have a universal answer, but must be grappled with depending on the topic and context of the game. Here, the proposed level does indeed display a level of confronting material that presents this challenge to the developers. Another criticism of the violent gameplay found in Ready or Not that is more widely shouldered within games in general is that of the presence of realistic violence and gore in its own right. Extremely violent acts are shown at various points throughout the game, including injuries from gunfire, improvised explosives, and depictions of dead bodies. This presents another opposition that many people raise to violence in games, the potential for depictions of violence to cause real-life violence, especially in younger individuals. This has long been a hotly debated topic in terms of ethical game production, with research both for and against the concept. Ready or Not does make a significant departure from the typical debate, however, due to the context of the violence that unfolds. The game does not glorify violence, instead it actively punishes it, making it impossible to achieve the highest possible score on any scenario after killing a single suspect, even an armed one. Summers' research suggests that this may make a significant difference in how players respond to the violence, with glorified violence producing a higher level of positive emotional response for the player than discouraged violence like that in Ready or Not. While the moment-to-moment gameplay of Ready or Not elicits debate about violence, the story and themes, both narrative and environmental, are potentially controversial for differing, more cultural reasons. The first problem presented is whether the game idolizes potentially negative or harmful law enforcement activities. The game has been criticized as propaganda, due in part to the almost purely heroic way members of law enforcement are portrayed as acting, and how the game places a unique emphasis on an officer's mental and physical health. Research from Weitzer shows that major police incidents typically cause a broad decline in citizens' attitude towards police. One therefore valid point to make about the game is that a lack of acknowledgement of the broader cultural and social impacts of such events, considering the gravity which it lends to other aspects of fictional events, may serve to glorify potentially controversial or upsetting themes, ignoring important considerations such as police brutality or breaches of rules of engagement. Ready or Not has significantly changed the way it handles such themes over the course of development to combat this, with the full release severely punishing players for unjustified uses of force through massive score penalties and even having AI team members kill the player in egregious cases. In modern times, where public opinion of law enforcement is dropping, a balanced depiction of police in realistic games is important, and Ready or Not indeed achieves this, with the idealized characters of D Platoon contrasted strongly with the blatant corruption in other agencies, such as the fictional Pfizer, revealed through voice lines and collectible in-game evidence. The second major challenge that Ready or Not is faced with in terms of social impact is tackling the potentially touchy subjects of poverty and socio-economic inequality in the United States. A US Census report reveals that in 2021, over 11% of US citizens lived below the poverty line. With this in mind, it is worth considering how American players may respond to the game's depictions of people living in poverty, especially with the War series of missions, which deals primarily with suspects living with extreme poverty, often involving drug use. One noticeable aspect of the game's portrayals of poverty is the vast lack of Black, Native American, and Hispanic representation specifically, within the model pool for suspects in these missions, despite poverty rates being recorded as higher within such demographics in the US. This decision is somewhat controversial, with arguments for and against the treatment. Some believe that the lack of representation may serve to hide systemic issues that influence the real statistic, while others believe that the decision is important to avoid unintended stereotyping from emerging. Given the examples above, it is evident the level of discussion about Ready or Not as a game in the media is warranted due to the controversial nature of its subject matter. Primarily, depictions of terrorism, gun violence, law enforcement, and socio-economic inequality present unique challenges to developers and publishers of games with such content.